Good morning, everyone. And on behalf of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, welcome to our third Executive Summit Series event of 2022. I'm Perrin Beatty, President and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Now, while we're meeting on a virtual platform today, I'd like to begin today's event by recognizing the Indigenous peoples of all of the lands that we're on today from coast to coast to coast. I want to acknowledge the ancestral territory of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people, and celebrate the importance of the land that we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility to improving relationships between nations in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Well, turning to today's event, the United States is Canada's most important global partner. We share geography, similar values, and a long history of collaboration. And of course, the United States is our most important trading partner. And we've built economic ties that are critical for the economic and social well-being of both countries. Given the events of the last couple of years, which include the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the ongoing impact of a global pandemic, supply chain disruptions, and the persistence of Buy American protectionism that remains popular on both sides of the political aisle in the United States, deepening our mutual economic and national security has become both more urgent and in many ways more difficult. The good news is that at least on the defense front, we have a solid foundation to start from. From the creation of NORAD in 1957 to bilateral defense industrial agreements like the Defense Production Sharing Agreement and the Defense Development Sharing Agreement, Canada and the United States have historically collaborated closely to advance our continental security. What we need now, however, is a modernized approach to address new and emerging security challenges like threats to our Arctic security and cyber attacks. We'll hear more about that in our first panel. Now, when it comes to trade, Canada and the United States have one of the most integrated economic relationships on the planet. But as I mentioned earlier, Buy American policies seriously undercut that relationship. With so many factors contributing to immense global supply chain disruptions, including the shifting geopolitical landscape, having sustainable and resilient cross-border supply chains and bilateral trade is more important than it's ever been. In our second panel of the day, we'll explore these themes in more detail, and we'll consider the opportunities and threats facing Canadian businesses in our new global environment. Now, all of today's discussions promise to be fascinating, and I hope that you're all looking forward to them as much as I am. So let's get started. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our first session, a keynote address and fireside chat with the Honorable Anita Anand, who's the Minister of National Defence of Canada. Over the years, Minister Anand has been a scholar, a researcher, a lawyer, a community volunteer, a professor, and now a member of Parliament and a minister. It's a remarkably diverse and accomplished career. Born and raised in rural Nova Scotia, Minister Anand moved to Ontario in 1985, and she was first elected as the Member of Parliament for Oakville in 2019. She has previously served as Minister of Public Services and Procurement, where I saw her tireless efforts to procure the medicine and equipment that Canadians so desperately needed in the fight against COVID-19. During her distinguished academic career, she's been a legal academic, including as a professor of law at the University of Toronto. She served as Associate Dean and was a member of the governing board of Massey College and the Director of Policy and Research at the Capital Markets Research Institute of the Rotman School of Management. She's also taught law at Yale Law School, Queen's University, and Western University. In 2019, the Royal Society of Canada awarded her the Van Allaire Medal for outstanding contributions in governance relating to public and private organizations. Minister Anand holds a Bachelor of Arts honors in political studies from Queen's University, a Bachelor of Arts honors in jurisprudence from the University of Oxford, a Bachelor of Laws from Dalhousie University, and a Master of Laws from the University of Toronto. It's an impressive set of credentials. Minister Anand, we're delighted that you could join us today. And let me turn the floor over to you for your opening remarks.
Well, thank you so much, Perrin, for that super generous introduction. I will say it is amazing to be back with you again. We spoke last year during the vaccine procurement time, especially a pressing time for Canada and for our government. And now we're back again, having a conversation in wartime. So I look forward to our fireside chat where I'm sure we'll discuss some of the key issues facing our government. But let me also begin by acknowledging that I am joining you today from the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. Today, we reaffirm our commitment to the meaningful reconciliation and respectful partnership with Indigenous peoples that is so very important. And before I start, I want to say, and Perrin, you may know this feeling well yourself, but not a day goes by where I'm not honored and privileged and grateful to serve as our Minister of National Defense, to support our Canadian Armed Forces, to build on the work of previous defense ministers before me, including, of course, the President of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, the Honorable Perrin Beatty. And Perrin, I want just to tell the audience also that when I was a student at Queen's University, I remember doing a lot of research on Arctic sovereignty and security and reading some of your important speeches and work in the House of Commons and at committee. And I just want to thank you for your service on so many issues that we as a government continue to work very hard on. Thank you for your service. We live in a world that is becoming darker, less secure, and more chaotic. Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine is a direct attack on the rules-based international order that has kept us safe for decades. Authoritarian states are challenging long-standing norms. Collective threats like climate change contribute to growing instability and uncertainty, which are all layered on to each other in creating a very set of diverse global threats. Les Canadiens veulent savoir ce que nous faisons pour assurer leur sécurité et celle de nos alliés dans ce contexte. Et cela comprend notre travail pour faire en sorte que les forces armées canadiennes disposent de l'équipement et de la formation dont elles ont besoin pour mener à bien leur mission. In my remarks today, I will focus on three main areas. First of all, Canada's support for Ukraine and in terms of ensuring the security of our NATO allies. Secondly, I will move on to discuss our continental defense priorities, including our plans to modernize NORAD alongside our American allies. And then thirdly, I will describe the innovative approach that we are taking when it comes to procurement, research and development, and partnership with Canadian businesses and academia, a topic which I am sure will be of interest to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. So let's start off by talking about Ukraine and NATO. First of all, Canada's response to Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine and the importance that it holds for our country and for the rules-based international order. Of course, it has almost been 3 months since I received a call in the middle of the night from the Chief of Defense Staff, General Eyre, confirming what our intelligence showed, that Russian forces had indeed commenced a full-fledged multi-pronged attack on Ukraine. Each and every day since then, we have witnessed Ukrainian forces defend their nation with courage. And in so doing, Ukrainians are also fighting for democracy, for freedom, for dignity. Words that are easy to say, but are so weighty and important in terms of the values which unite us all. Ukrainian forces have bravely defended Kyiv and have begun to retake territory around Kharkiv and throughout the country. And Canada's allies and partners are, as we know, united in support of Ukraine, and we will continue to support Ukraine through its darkest hour and into its brightest days. Depuis 2015, nos forces armées ont formé plus de 33 000 membres des forces sécurité ukrainiennes, une formation qui les a aidés à repousser les attaques d'un agresseur d'une taille beaucoup plus grande. Et nous avons aussi beaucoup appris des Ukrainiens. Ils sont dans ce combat depuis l'annexion illégale de la Crimée par la Russie en 2014 et ont fait preuve d'une persévérance et d'une résilience incroyable depuis le tout début. Since February, our government has announced over $130 million in military aid for Ukraine. This aid continues to flow into the country, and we are working to identify and provide additional military aid to Ukraine with the $500 million that we announced in budget 2022 for this purpose. Together with our allies and partners, the bottom line is that Canada will continue to supply comprehensive military support to Ukraine to help it fight and win this horrific war. We are also prepared to help defend every inch of NATO territory from Latvia and Romania to Iceland to the vast Canadian Arctic. To boost NATO's deterrence operations in Central and Eastern Europe, Canada has significantly increased our presence and contributions to allied operations. For example, we have added approximately 460 Canadian Armed Forces personnel on land, air, and sea, and have 3,400 members of our Canadian Armed Forces on standby in case the alliance needs them. Shifting now to our own continent, which could also be understood to be NATO's western flank. Now, since 2017, Canada's defense policy, strong, secure, engaged, has been our roadmap to ensure that Canada is strong at home, secure in North America, and engaged in the world. And as many of you may be aware, that policy, strong, secure, engaged, also known as SSE, will soon be undergoing a swift update, taking into account just how much the threat environment has changed since that policy was launched. Now, with new and emerging threats such as advanced cruise missiles, cyber attacks, and the impacts of climate change, our policy update will guide our work to protect Canadians in the years to come. Now, in a changing world, we will continue to work closely alongside our closest ally and defense partner, as Parent mentioned, the United States. And we must, and we will, invest substantively in NORAD modernization to ensure the continued security of our North American continent. Through Budget 2021, we made an initial investment of $252 million towards NORAD modernization. In Budget 2022, we announced over $6 billion for new military capabilities, including continental defense. In the short term, I will present a robust and detailed plan for NORAD modernization, and I continue to engage with the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, on this shared priority. In fact, 3 weeks ago, I met with him in Washington to discuss this issue in person and to review our 4 key priority areas for new investment. Our two nations, in fact, agreed to these 4 priority areas last summer. They include enhanced situational awareness, modernized command and control systems, improved capabilities to deter and defeat aerospace threats, and continuing to strengthen critically important research and development. And as we work to modernize NORAD and strengthen CAF capabilities to operate in the Arctic, I am pleased that a new contract was recently awarded to the Inuit-owned Nasatuk Corporation for approximately $600 million to operate the North Warning System. And this contract and arrangement will provide support services to enable the ongoing surveillance of our northern approaches and complement new capabilities as they are brought online. We are also looking at ensuring the extension of the runway at Inuvik Airport, a NORAD forward operating location. And work continues on the Nanisivik Naval Station on Baffin Island. Besides NORAD, we continue making measurable and tangible progress in the renewal of our major fleets, which we committed to under SSE. For example, we are procuring 6 new Arctic and offshore patrol vessels. One of them, the HMS Harry DeWolf, recently circumnavigated North America. We are modernizing our Victoria-class subs, building 15 Canadian surface combatants, ordering 360 armored combat support vehicles, and we are in the finalization stage of a new contract for 88 new fighter aircraft. In fact, the Future Fighter project is the most significant investment in the Royal Canadian Air Force in decades. It will provide our pilots and our air crews with state-of-the-art equipment to carry out their missions, add value to our international alliances, and enhance our Arctic sovereignty. Collaboration between D&D and my former portfolio at Public Services and Procurement Canada is absolutely essential to see this project and others come to fruition. Et il y aura d'autres opportunités pour encore plus de partenariats avec notre industrie domestique de défense à mesure que nous avançons sur les priorités du Canada quant à la modernisation du NORAD et la défense continentale. J'ai hâte d'en discuter dans les semaines et les mois à venir avec les Canadiens et avec bon nombre d'entre vous qui écoutez ici aujourd'hui et de présenter prochainement un plan solide pour moderniser le NORAD. Thirdly and finally, I will address the crucial importance of partnership with Canadian industry and experts when it comes to defense procurement, research, and development. The defense industry enables 64,000 jobs, $7 billion in GDP annually, and $415 million in R&D activity. It is an essential element of our national security, and we are always working to streamline, improve, and innovate the way in which we collaborate with industry partners. Let me just share one example of what this collaboration looked like. Our friends in Ukraine asked Canada to provide precision cameras for military drones, which are manufactured right here in Canada. In just 3 or 4 days, we managed to turn around a contract for these devices in collaboration with the manufacturer. And in just 1 week, those cameras were in Ukraine and affixed to drones for use in combat. We now have gone back to the supplier to ensure we have a contract to maintain those cameras and supply additional ones as needed. That is the speed at which procurement can move and has moved in recent times, and what happens when government and industry work together. We are always looking for opportunities to be more collaborative and innovative. And let me describe 2 programs that National Defense has set up to do just that. First of all, ideas. In recent years, the Department of National Defense established the Innovation in Defense Excellence and Security Program, or IDEAS, which provides funding mechanisms to assist Canadian innovators in solving defense and security challenges. IDEAS is about homegrown talent. If you are an innovator or a researcher with a promising idea, we will support you from the concept stage through prototype testing and capability development. And this type of partnership enables Canadian innovation. It allows Canada to maintain technological advantage in the defense sector. And through this program, we will invest $1.6 billion over 2 decades to spur innovation in many fields, with the immediate goal of investing $313 million over the first 5 years. D&D has received impressive proposals from top innovators across the country. In the first year alone, we received more than 600 proposals and awarded more than 200 contracts. There's a very wide scope for the research, I am excited to see what innovators and entrepreneurs bring forward as future challenges arise. Another example of collaboration in national defense is our strong relationship with academics, experts, and thought leaders. Fundamental to this relationship is a program called MINDS, or Mobilizing Insights in Defense and Security. Through the MINDS program, we are signing multi-year agreements with networks of experts to help inform our policies and our approaches on key priorities, like continental defense, like NORAD modernization, like information security, organizational culture, and military design. The fact of the matter is that MINDS has brought in experts to brief the defense team on pressing issues of the day, to inform our policymaking, and to improve our understanding of pan-domain capabilities, emerging technologies like AI and quantum computing. It also helps develop the next generation of defense and security experts through scholarships and an annual fellowship at the NATO Defense College. MINDS isn't just limited to academia, of course. DND is also funding a variety of projects through MINDS that involve other partners, including the private sector, think tanks, and civil society. Why does all of this matter? Because we have world-class academic institutions, civil society groups, and think tanks here in Canada, and expertise and diverse viewpoints from outside of government are necessary for evidence-based policymaking. In fact, when I was a professor, I frequently undertook research for government, both provincial and federal, and understood what it was like to be on the other side of providing expertise and advice to the government. And I see a profound value in such relationships. And in fact, as we map out the next steps of Canadian defense policy, we want you to be involved to help us deliver real world solutions to our most pressing defense and security challenges. Through programs like Ideas and Minds, we seek your input, and we will continue to look for even more opportunities for collaboration. And to conclude, although our world is changing and threats are growing, Canada as a country will continue to be a beacon of stability and safety. Canada holds dear the principles of democracy, national sovereignty, and international law. Our allies and partners want more Canada, and Canadians, be they armed forces personnel, industry partners, or security experts, have a great deal to contribute. We will continue to stand by Ukraine. We will remain ready to help defend every inch of NATO territory, and we are laying the groundwork for a robust continental defense plan that will ensure the security of North America in the years to come. Je vous suis reconnaissante pour les contributions que vous faites pour bâtir une économie forte et un Canada fort. Let's keep this conversation going. Let's look for more innovative ways to partner together. Et maintenant, je vais prête de recevoir vos questions aussi. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much.
Minister, thank you very much for a fascinating tour d'horizon. You've taken up the portfolio at just a critical time. At the best of times, changing from portfolio to portfolio makes you feel as if you're cramming for the finals. But you're thrust into it at a time which is absolutely critical for Canada and for the world. And we greatly appreciate the effort that you're making. Minister, you alluded to the fact that I was Minister of National Defense some years ago. And I'm struck by the fact that when I was Defense Minister, it was in a very different defense environment, with the first signs that the Cold War might be coming to an end. My goal was to look at how Canada's defense and security needs had evolved in the same way as you're talking about updating the current strategy, and in particular, how we could reconcile our commitments with our capabilities. After conducting the largest deployment of Canadian troops to Europe since World War II, it was called Operation Brave Lion. We decided to refocus our efforts on the defense of Canada. The rationale was that our commitment to defending North Norway was unsustainable, and that contracting out the defense of North America to the United States had left Canada as an American protectorate, that we'd sacrificed our sovereignty. where do you see the balance between defending Canada's security and sovereignty here at home and responding to the Russian threat in Europe?
Well, it's a very important question, obviously, and it hits right at the heart of everything we are doing at D&D right now. Let me start by talking about NORAD, because that is the very foundation for continental defense. It is the foundation for our relationship with the United States from a defense perspective. And it is also so important as well, as I said, to NATO's Western flank. I want to, first of all, be clear that Canada will be at the table with a robust package to modernize NORAD and continental defense, backed by significant investments. And I am very true to my mandate letter in terms of this being a priority for our government, and it's a priority for Secretary Austin, my counterpart in the US as well. But heading a little further backwards in time, as you suggested in your question, continental defense writ large is the unwritten chapter of Strong, Secure, Engaged. And it is something that the Canadian Armed Forces and D&D have been working on for several years. For example, Budget 2021 already contained an initial investment of $252 million towards the modernization of NORAD. And so the plan that I am looking forward to presenting in the short term builds on work that has historically been undertaken at D&D, builds on our commitment to ensure Arctic sovereignty and the defense of the North American continent, as well as to continue to collaborate with our US partners. Now, the question I think that's very important from an industry perspective, and so important for the Chamber of Commerce, of course, is where does the defense industry sit in terms of what we are looking at defense at D&D? Now, the defense industry in Canada has clearly demonstrated its ability to provide the modern, effective capabilities that are so important to Canada's overall preparedness. But it's not just about capabilities of today, it's also about investing in the capabilities of tomorrow. And in terms of our commitment to continental defense, as well as providing Ukraine with what it needs, we are leaving no stone unturned in the work that we are undertaking with industry. We are bringing our expertise in contracting to bear on the work that we are doing, both in terms of continental defense and Ukraine writ large. And as I mentioned, with the example relating to cameras, as well as the Rochelle vehicles that we are sending to Ukraine right now, that expertise in contracting is making a difference. And we look forward to working very hard on both the continental side and the aid to Ukraine in the weeks to come. Thank you.
And you're satisfied, Minister, that it is possible for us to sustain both commitments, the commitment in Europe and the commitment to significantly enhance our contribution to self-defense in Canada?
Most definitely. And by saying most definitely, I don't want to sound facile. This is a very difficult file, and we need to make sure at all times that we are meeting our commitments, both at home and in terms of continental defense, as well as in terms of our NATO commitments. And so we have many discussions around the table with the Chief of Defense Staff and my deputy minister and our respective teams. But there are definitely the impetus and the desire to ensure that we are contributing as necessary to our NATO commitments, to Ukraine, as well as to NORAD. And as you might have seen in the past 6 months, we are firing on all cylinders, and we will continue to do so.
Minister, as you'll be seeing every day, the men and women in Canada's armed forces are patriots in the best sense of the word. They literally put their lives on the line every day on behalf of our country. Yet they do so with equipment that's often inadequate and outdated. Often it's older than the men and women using it. And a great concern, certainly I had in my day, and I'm sure that you have as well, is that we have a moral contract with the men and women in the Canadian forces, that if we ask them to put their lives at risk, we have an obligation to ensure they have a mandate which is achievable and that they have the tools to do the job. As we know, Canada's never met its commitment to devote 2% of our GDP to defense. And I'm reminded of the comment that Admiral Thomas, who was the head of Canada's Navy at the time, made to me when he said, "Minister, you can have as much sovereignty as you're prepared to pay for." In your opinion, what does our military budget need to be to pay for our defense needs and to protect our sovereignty?
We need to continue making our contributions to both NATO and to bolster NORAD and our continental defense writ large. Our defense policy, strong, secure, engaged, is ensuring that we have an increase of 70% in defense spending over a 9-year period beginning in 2017. In addition to that, in budget 2022, our government committed $8 billion to enhance our defense spending. So the reality is that we are on an upward trajectory in terms of both our financial commitment to NATO as well as our defense of the North American continent under NORAD and continental security. And the principle that you began your question with is of utmost importance. We need to make sure that our Canadian Armed Forces have the resources and equipment they need to defend our country and to contribute to our multilateral alliances here on the North American continent and abroad. And that will always be a priority for me and for our government.
Can we and will we achieve the 2% of GDP target?
We will continue enhancing our capabilities in terms of the resources and support for the Canadian Armed Forces, as well as in terms of our commitments to NATO and NORAD. And as I said, we are on an upward trajectory, which is very, very important, especially in terms of the changing global threat environment.
Can we turn to the modernization of NORAD, which you mentioned in your remarks? And it's one of the major items in your mandate letter from the Prime Minister, and is also one of the joint priorities that was identified in the 2021 roadmap for renewed US-Canada partnership. At what stage are we in our commitment to modernize NORAD? And as we move forward, how do you plan to leverage our defense industrial base and our industrial strengths in areas like artificial intelligence and quantum computing and cyber defense to contribute to this major binational effort?
Well, it's such a great question. As I said, NORAD and continental defense is the unwritten chapter in Strong, Secure, Engaged. And I feel honored that as the Minister of National Defense, I am working on that chapter now, and we'll have a robust plan to modernize NORAD to bring forward in the short term. In terms of what we are doing specifically in NORAD modernization, we need to ensure that we are building on those 4 principles that I mentioned in my remarks, which include command and control, which includes surveillance systems, especially in times where we see hypersonic missiles and other new innovative products on the horizon. And in fact, we need to ensure that we have over the horizon radar systems of some sort available. We need to collaborate with the United States with advanced technology, and that's exactly what we are looking to ensure we do in NORAD modernization. And in terms of leveraging industry, we will continue to work closely with industry. We have ongoing efforts to strengthen both a domestic and continental defense in conjunction with our capabilities. And our capabilities actually emanate from not only the Canadian Armed Forces, but also the equipment that they use every day to do their jobs. And equipping Canadian Armed Forces is, as I said, at the top of my mandate letter, and an issue that I take extremely seriously. In terms of what we are going to do vis-a-vis the United States and working closely with them, our partnership is very tight. I have a very strong relationship with my counterpart, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. And as I said in our bilat in person in Washington a few weeks ago, we both recognize the importance of moving forward on the priority areas in terms of NORAD modernization. As I said, command and control, upgrading capabilities, leveraging collaborative research. So the bottom line here, Perrin, is that we remain committed to a high degree of collaboration with the United States, as well as engagement with Canadian industry to do what we need to do to write that last chapter of SSE and commit to NORAD modernization and continental defense.
Let's drill down a bit, if we can, on the bilateral relationship with the United States. In the past, Canada and the US came together to develop new, more integrated approaches to continental defense. And together we deepened our cooperation in building our defense industrial base following historical inflection points like the Second World War, Sputnik, the Soviet missile threat, 9/11. Today, it's quite clear that we've reached, and you've alluded to it, another inflection point. Is it time now to develop a new strategic statement of intent with Washington that would set out a broad binational framework for continental defense, which is better fit for today's international security environment, and that we should also update agreements like the Canada-US Defense Production Sharing Agreement?
I really appreciate the question, Perrin, and in particular, I want to bring in a couple of themes. First of all, focus on your question, binational strategic framework, but also I'll broaden it out just briefly to speak about the Arctic, because that has arisen in terms of the conflict in Europe, but also in terms of my conversations with Secretary of State Austin. First of all, on the binational strategic framework, we will continue working closely with the US to address emerging threats and evolving continental defense requirements. The US is our most important ally and defense partner, and our two countries are unwavering in our support for Ukraine. We recently provided, in conjunction with our American allies, M777 howitzers to the Ukrainian forces, for which Canadian soldiers are now training their Ukrainian counterparts in their use. Our two militaries have worked together on this, as well as on continental defense and support for Ukraine every day. This is the strength of our bilateral relationship at work. And I am grateful to have had a genuine and warm reception and relationship with Secretary Austin. We will continue to examine the ways in which Canada can contribute to a renewed and restructured relationship with the United States whenever it's needed. But the reality is this relationship is working very well now. My predecessor, Minister Sajjan, set the stage for NORAD modernization by agreeing on those 4 principles with the United States last August, and we'll continue to work very hard in terms of further collaboration where it is needed. I'll just now briefly move to Arctic engagement, because as I said, that is part of continental defense. That is part of ensuring that our relationship with the United States takes into account every inch of our territory, geographically speaking. Now, the Arctic is at an inflection point, as we both know, not simply because of climate change and technological advancements and economic opportunities, but also because of the war in Ukraine. The Arctic is also home to approximately 150,000 inhabitants, of which more than half are Indigenous. So as we move forward to ensure our sovereignty of the Arctic, in conjunction with the United States, we have to make sure we are engaged with Indigenous communities. We are taking into account climate change. We are also making sure that technological advances are present and able to contribute to Arctic sovereignty writ large.
Minister, can we pursue this question of the Arctic for just a bit? I realize time is running short, but this is a critical area. In my day, we felt that it was important for Canada to focus very clearly on the Arctic, and that Canada had to provide for our own defense there because our friends, the Americans, didn't accept some of our territorial claims, including sovereignty over the Northwest Passage. We've seen in Ukraine that the Russians are not great respecters of their neighbors' territory, and we are their neighbors in the Arctic. And with climate change, the Arctic archipelago is opening up. It means then that the whole issue of Canadian sovereignty and defense is more challenging than ever before. Historically, Arctic states have been generally successful in cooperatively managing issues related to the Arctic, but geopolitical tensions in the region are escalating. It's increasingly clear that the region is an area where states, including Russia and China, have interests that compete with ours. How are we ensuring that Canada's, as opposed to North America's, interests in the Arctic are fully respected at a time of worsening geopolitical divisions?
Listen, that's a fantastic question again. And again, it's something I'm working on every single day. I laid out the procurements that we have in process to ensure that we have the equipment that is needed to shore up our Arctic sovereignty. The 6 Arctic and offshore patrol ships, for example, for the Royal Canadian Navy, one of which that has circumnavigated the North American continent, the contracts that we're putting in place for the surface combatant, the 88 fighter jets contract that will be finalized hopefully this year. I will just say, though, that we need to ensure from a Canadian perspective that our allies and partners are also on board with the need to consider all security risks that are facing the Arctic. And to this end, I convened a virtual meeting on Monday with Arctic allies and partners from the Kingdom of Denmark, from Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and the United States, where we discussed evolving security dynamics in the Arctic as well as Ukraine. And we have agreed to continue to keep in close touch as we move forward. And I have invited them to visit Canada and for us to visit the Arctic together in the next few months. And why is that? Because Canada's collaboration with our allies in terms of Arctic sovereignty is fundamental. We have to ensure that we are cooperating and it very much engaged in terms of protecting shared interests and values. We do this in NATO, we do this in NORAD, and we will continue to be a partner in these multilateral organizations. So I will just say that the protection of our Arctic is fundamentally important. We will go ahead with plans to modernize NORAD in conjunction with our Indigenous communities, and we will continue in terms of Arctic sovereignty in particular to engage with them, but also with our Arctic allies and partners, as I mentioned already. The bottom line is Arctic sovereignty is fundamentally important to me and to our government, and we will leave no stone unturned to ensure that Canada is playing its part to protect that region.
Minister, thank you. Over the course of the last few minutes, we've covered a lot of territory, There are many other questions that I know that I would like to ask, that others would like to hear your answers on as well. But we're extremely grateful to you for taking time out to be with us today. And there is no portfolio that is more important at this critical time, more important to Canada than the one that you occupy. And we're very fortunate to have as a minister somebody with your intelligence and somebody with your evident commitment to the interests of Canada. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for sharing your insights with us. Good luck, and you can certainly count on the Canadian business community to assist in any way that we can as you discharge your important responsibilities.
Well, thank you so much, Perrin, and thank you to all of your members for their indulgence over the course of the last 45 minutes. I really appreciate the time that you took to ask me those questions and to invite me here today. And I'll look forward to coming back and talking more about some of these issues.